Chosen one, there are things about you that no one ever explained, things you felt but could never fully name. Moments when your intuition spoke louder than logic, when you sensed shifts in energy before anything actually happened, when you knew something without being told. Maybe people called you too sensitive, too intense, or too different, but deep down you always felt there was more to it. What if those feelings were never random? What if what you've been experiencing all along are hidden gifts, abilities quietly placed within you, waiting for awareness to awaken them? Most people move through life focused only on what can be seen, touched, or measured. They trust what is obvious, predictable, and socially accepted. But you've always noticed the invisible layers. You feel atmospheres in rooms before anyone speaks. You pick up on emotions others try to hide. Sometimes you understand people's intentions before they even act. This isn't imagination. This is perception beyond the surface. And when a person begins to perceive beyond the surface, life stops looking ordinary. You may have noticed that your journey has never followed the normal path. You've experienced periods of isolation, confusion, or emotional intensity that felt overwhelming, but hidden gifts rarely develop in comfort. They sharpen in silence. They deepen in solitude. They grow strongest when the world becomes quiet enough for you to finally hear what has always been whispering inside you. Think about the times you felt pulled away from certain environments without logical reason. The friendships that suddenly felt heavy. The places that drained your energy for no clear explanation. Your mind may have questioned it, but your inner sense knew. That inner sense is one of the earliest signs of heightened awareness. It protects you before danger becomes visible. It guides you before clarity arrives. And yet, many people spend years ignoring it because they were taught to trust only what others approve of. But your experiences keep repeating, don't they? That inner knowing never leaves. It only grows louder when ignored. Hidden gifts often reveal themselves through patterns. You may notice that people naturally confide in you, even strangers. They feel safe around you without understanding why. They share their burdens, their secrets, their fears. You didn't ask to carry emotional weight, yet somehow it finds you. This happens because presence speaks louder than words. When someone carries deep awareness, others subconsciously recognize it. They sense depth. They sense understanding. They sense a kind of perception that sees beyond appearances. And that perception, that quiet ability to read emotional energy, is not something everyone possesses. Another sign is your relationship with intuition, not just gut feelings, but sudden insights that arrive fully formed. Answers appearing without step-by-step reasoning. A strong inner voice guiding decisions that later prove correct, even when logic disagreed at the time. You may have doubted yourself in those moments, wondering if you were overthinking or imagining things. But over time, you started noticing something undeniable. When you listen to that inner guidance, things align. When you ignore it, resistance appears. That is not coincidence. That is alignment responding to awareness. Many hidden abilities operate quietly because they are subtle. They don't announce themselves dramatically. They unfold through sensitivity, perception, and deep internal processing. For example, you might feel emotionally affected by environments others barely notice. Loud, chaotic spaces may exhaust you quickly. Artificial interactions may leave you drained. But peaceful, authentic environments restore you instantly. This happens because your system processes more information than average. Your awareness filters layers of emotional and energetic input simultaneously. What overwhelms you is invisible to others, but very real within you. And because of this heightened sensitivity, you may have spent years trying to toughen up, to become less affected, less aware, less intense. But what if your sensitivity is not weakness but precision? What if it's not something to suppress, but something to understand? Precision perception is one of the most misunderstood hidden gifts. It allows you to notice subtle shifts, emotional undercurrents, and patterns that others overlook. It makes you observant, intuitive, and deeply responsive to truth. But without understanding it, this gift can feel like burden instead of power. Then there are moments when you experience strong inner visions or vivid imagination that feels more like perception than creativity. You picture outcomes, scenarios, or insights that later unfold in reality. You feel drawn to symbolism, meaning, and deeper interpretation of everyday events. Nothing feels random to you. Everything feels connected somehow, even if you can't always explain how. This pattern recognition is another form of heightened awareness. It sees connections beyond the obvious timeline of events. It senses direction before movement happens. You may also have experienced sudden emotional waves that don't seem to belong to you. Feelings that appear out of nowhere when you are near certain people or places. Then they disappear just as suddenly when you leave. This can be confusing, even unsettling, but it reflects emotional receptivity. Some individuals naturally detect emotional frequencies the way others detect sound or light. They don't just observe emotion, they feel its presence directly. And when you don't yet understand this ability, it can feel like emotional overload rather than perception. But once recognized, it becomes information, guidance, awareness. Perhaps the most powerful hidden gift is deep inner knowing about your own life path. Even when you feel lost, a quiet sense remains that you are meant for something meaningful, something purposeful, something beyond ordinary routine. This feeling never fully disappears, no matter how much you try to live normally. It returns in quiet moments, it surfaces during reflection. It speaks when life becomes still. And sometimes it feels almost like being guided, like something within you is always pointing toward growth, toward truth, toward transformation. This inner direction is not wishful thinking. It is awareness of potential that has not yet fully manifested. Hidden gifts often reveal themselves through discomfort because growth requires expansion. Expansion requires change, and change challenges familiar identity. You may have noticed that every time you begin settling into comfort, something shifts, something pushes you to evolve again. New questions arise, new awareness surfaces, new perspectives emerge. It's as if remaining the same is never an option for you. That constant inner movement is not instability. It is development, it is awakening, and awakening rarely feels calm in the beginning. It feels confusing, intense, and sometimes lonely because others may not relate to what you're experiencing. But loneliness does not mean you are lost. It often means you are perceiving reality at a different depth than those around you. Hidden gifts become clearer when you stop trying to dismiss them and start observing them. Notice your patterns. Notice your instincts. Notice what consistently proves accurate even when you doubt it. Notice what drains you and what energizes you deeply. Notice the environments where your awareness sharpens and the ones where it dulls. Your experiences are not random fragments. They are clues, pieces of a larger understanding forming gradually over time. Many people live their entire lives without ever questioning the deeper layers of perception available to them. But once awareness begins expanding, it cannot fully return to unconsciousness. You begin seeing more, feeling more, understanding more, and while that can feel overwhelming at first, it also opens the door to extraordinary clarity. The truth is, hidden gifts do not appear suddenly. They reveal themselves slowly through lived experience, emotional depth, and inner listening. They are not given to make you feel separate from others, but to help you understand reality more deeply, to perceive what is unseen, to respond with awareness rather than reaction. And the moment you begin recognizing these abilities, they begin strengthening. Awareness amplifies what it observes. The more you trust your perception, the clearer it becomes. The more you listen to intuition, the stronger it speaks. The more you honor sensitivity, the more precise it becomes. Nothing within you is accidental. Every pattern, every instinct, every moment of unexplained knowing, all of it forms a language your inner self has been speaking long before you learn to listen. And perhaps the most important realization of all is this: hidden gifts are not meant to remain hidden forever. They reveal themselves when you are ready to see yourself clearly, not as someone strange, not as someone different in a negative way, but as someone aware in a world that often moves too fast to notice what truly exists beneath the surface. And maybe, just maybe, what you once thought made you unusual is actually what makes you perceptive, intuitive, and deeply connected to dimensions of experience most people never pause long enough to recognize. At some point in your journey, you probably began noticing that your awareness was not just passive observation, it was active perception. You don't simply experience life, you sense layers within it. And the more you pay attention, the more you realize that your hidden gifts are not random flashes of intuition or occasional emotional sensitivity. They operate like a quiet system that is always running in the background, constantly gathering information, constantly interpreting signals most people never notice. This is when things start to feel different, because awareness begins turning into recognition. You start recognizing patterns in people's behavior before they become obvious. You recognize emotional shifts before words are spoken. You recognize tension in spaces that appear calm on the surface. And slowly a realization forms: your perception is not limited to physical reality. It extends into subtle signals, emotional currents, and intuitive impressions that arrive without explanation. This stage can feel both empowering and unsettling at the same time. Empowering because you begin understanding that your experiences have meaning. Unsettling because you realize how much you perceive that others seem completely unaware of. You may find yourself watching conversations unfold while already sensing their outcome. You may feel drawn toward certain decisions without logical reasoning, only to later see how precisely those instincts protected or guided you. It's almost as if your inner awareness sees pathways before they fully form, and when this keeps happening again and again, it becomes harder to dismiss it as coincidence. Something deeper is operating within you, something responsive, intelligent, and incredibly precise, but hidden abilities rarely arrive with instruction manuals. Instead, they develop through experience, especially emotional experience. One of the strongest ways these gifts awaken is through intense personal challenges. Moments of uncertainty, loss, confusion, or deep reflection often act like that forces awareness to expand. During these times, your perception sharpens because survival requires understanding more than what is visible. You begin sensing truth beneath appearances. You begin detecting authenticity versus illusion. And slowly, without even realizing it, your mind learns to read reality on multiple levels at once. What once felt overwhelming becomes information. What once felt chaotic becomes pattern. You may have also noticed that time feels different to you during certain moments. Sometimes everything slows down and your awareness becomes extremely clear, almost as if you are observing reality from a slightly elevated perspective. Other times insights arrive instantly, bypassing logical thought completely. You just know what to do, what to say, or what direction to take. These experiences are often described as heightened states of awareness, moments when your perception becomes fully aligned with intuition. In these states, clarity feels effortless. There is no confusion, no hesitation, no internal noise, only direct understanding, and yet outside of those moments, doubt often returns. This is part of the awakening process. Hidden gifts challenge the way you were taught to understand reality. You were likely conditioned to trust external validation more than internal knowing. So when your inner perception provides information that cannot be proven or explained immediately, your mind questions it. This inner conflict between intuitive certainty and logical doubt is one of the most defining experiences of people with heightened awareness. Learning to navigate this tension is part of developing your abilities, not by rejecting logic, but by allowing intuition and reason to work together rather than compete. Another powerful sign of expanding perception is your relationship with truth. You may notice that dishonesty feels physically uncomfortable to you, even when it's subtle. You can sense when something is off, even if everything appears fine externally. False intentions, hidden motives, emotional suppression, these things become visible to your awareness in ways others don't notice. This can make social interactions complicated because you often perceive what people are trying to hide, even when they are unaware of it themselves. And while this can feel isolating at times, it is also a form of clarity. You are not easily deceived because your perception extends beyond surface communication. As these abilities grow stronger, you may also experience periods of withdrawal, times when you feel an intense need for solitude. This is not avoidance, it is recalibration. Your awareness processes enormous amounts of subtle information, and solitude allows your system to reset, integrate, and restore balance. Without these quiet periods, overstimulation can occur. That sense of emotional exhaustion you sometimes feel after crowded environments or intense interactions is not weakness. It is the natural result of processing more than what is visibly present. Rest becomes essential because your perception is constantly active. You may also notice an increasing sensitivity to meaning itself. Ordinary experiences begin to feel symbolic. Conversations carry deeper implications. Repeated numbers, recurring themes, or synchronistic events begin appearing in ways that feel intentional rather than random. Your mind starts recognizing connections between inner experience and external reality. This doesn't mean everything has a mystical explanation. It means your awareness is becoming skilled at recognizing patterns of alignment. When perception expands, randomness often reveals underlying structure. One of the most profound shifts happens when you begin trusting your inner guidance consistently. At first, intuition feels like suggestion. Then it becomes direction. Eventually, it becomes partnership. You begin living with the awareness that something within you is always observing, always guiding, always responding to your attention. Decisions feel less like guesses and more like alignment. You move toward what feels right rather than what merely appears logical. And over time, you begin noticing how often this inner guidance leads you exactly where you need to be, even when the path makes no sense at the beginning. However, hidden gifts do not exist only to provide perception. They also carry responsibility. Awareness changes how you interact with the world. When you sense emotional pain in others, you cannot ignore it easily. When you perceive truth beneath illusion, pretending not to see it becomes difficult. When your intuition warns you about something, ignoring it has consequences. Heightened awareness asks for conscious living. It asks you to pay attention, to respond thoughtfully, to act with intention rather than impulse. This is why developing these abilities is not about becoming extraordinary in a dramatic sense. It is about becoming deeply present, deeply observant, deeply aligned with reality as it truly is rather than how it appears on the surface. The more your awareness grows, the more authenticity becomes essential. You cannot live disconnected from truth while simultaneously perceiving it clearly. Alignment becomes necessary between what you feel, what you know, and how you live. And perhaps the most transformative realization is this: your hidden gifts are not separate from who you are. They are not external powers or special additions. They are natural extensions of consciousness that awaken when attention deepens. They have always been part of you, quietly operating, patiently waiting for recognition. Every moment of intuition, every unexplained knowing, every emotional signal you detected before anyone else, these were not anomalies. They were expressions of your natural perceptive capacity. The journey now is not about searching for abilities, but about understanding them, refining them, trusting them, allowing them to guide rather than confuse you, because once awareness reaches this stage, it cannot return to unconsciousness. You begin seeing more clearly with every experience, feeling more precisely with every interaction, understanding more deeply with every moment of reflection. And as this continues, something remarkable happens. What once felt hidden no longer feels mysterious. It feels natural, integrated, familiar, like a language you always knew, but are only now learning how to speak fluently. There comes a stage in this journey where awareness no longer feels like something that simply happens to you. It becomes something you consciously participate in. Up until now, your hidden gifts may have felt spontaneous, unpredictable, almost mysterious. They appeared when they wanted, revealed what they wanted, and then faded back into quiet observation. But as your perception deepens, a shift begins to occur. You realize that these abilities respond to your attention. What you notice grows clearer. What you trust becomes stronger. What you ignore becomes quieter. Awareness, in many ways, behaves like a living system that expands in direct proportion to how much you engage with it. This realization can feel both empowering and overwhelming. Because once you understand that your perception is responsive, you begin to recognize that you are not just receiving insight, you are shaping how clearly it flows. Your focus becomes like a lens. When scattered, everything feels confusing and overstimulating, but when steady perception sharpens with incredible precision, you begin noticing how your emotional state affects your clarity. When you are calm, grounded, and present, your intuitive understanding becomes almost effortless. But when you are anxious, distracted, or emotionally overwhelmed, the signals feel distorted or difficult to interpret. This teaches you something profound. Inner balance is not just beneficial for well-being, it is essential for accurate perception. And this is where discipline quietly enters the process. Not rigid control, but intentional awareness. You begin observing your thoughts more carefully. You notice how certain environments cloud your perception while others enhance it. You recognize how emotional noise interferes with intuitive clarity. Slowly, almost without realizing it, you start organizing your inner world the way someone would tune an instrument. You adjust what you consume mentally and emotionally. You create space for silence. You become selective about what you give your attention to, because you start understanding that attention is energy, and wherever energy flows, perception follows. During this phase, many people experience an increase in what feels like energetic sensitivity. But this isn't new sensitivity, it is refined awareness. You begin distinguishing between what belongs to you and what originates outside you. Before, emotional experiences may have blended together in an overwhelming wave. Now you start sensing differences. You can feel when tension in a room is not yours. You can detect when someone's mood shifts even if they say nothing. You can recognize when your body responds to subtle signals your mind has not consciously processed yet. This separation is important because it creates clarity. Instead of absorbing everything automatically, you begin observing it. Observation transforms experience. When you observe rather than absorb, perception becomes information rather than burden. Emotional signals become guidance rather than overwhelm. Environmental shifts become awareness rather than confusion. And gradually you develop something incredibly powerful, inner stability in the presence of external intensity. You can feel deeply without becoming consumed. You can notice everything without losing balance. You can perceive truth without reacting impulsively. This is one of the most important developing of hidden abilities, the ability to remain grounded while perceiving subtle layers of reality. At this point, your relationship with intuition changes again. Earlier, intuition may have felt like sudden flashes or quiet nudges. Now, it begins to feel continuous, like an ongoing stream of subtle feedback, small adjustments in direction, gentle internal signals guiding attention, a sense of alignment or misalignment that is always present beneath your thoughts. It's almost like developing an internal compass that constantly orients you, not just toward physical choices, but toward emotional and psychological balance as well. You may also notice that your perception of time continues to shift. Moments of deep awareness feel expansive, almost spacious, as if you are experiencing more information within the same amount of time. You become more present, more observant, more connected to what is happening right now. And strangely, when you are fully present, decisions become easier because clarity does not exist in distraction. It exists in attention. The more completely you inhabit the present moment, the more precisely you perceive what is unfolding within it. However, as perception sharpens, another challenge often appears: responsibility toward truth. When you see clearly, you cannot easily pretend not to see. When you sense emotional reality beneath surface behavior, ignoring it feels dishonest to yourself. When your intuition repeatedly confirms something, denying it becomes increasingly uncomfortable. This is where many people experience internal conflict, because clarity sometimes requires difficult choices. It asks you to step away from environments that drain you, to question patterns that feel familiar but unhealthy, to release connections that no longer align with your awareness. Growth demands alignment, and alignment often requires change. This stage can feel like standing between two versions of reality, the comfortable familiar and the clearly perceived truth. Choosing truth requires courage because stepping into uncertainty. But something within you begins valuing authenticity more than comfort. You start realizing that living in misalignment creates constant internal tension, while living in alignment creates peace, even when circumstances are challenging. And this realization gradually reshapes how you make decisions. You begin choosing what feels deeply right rather than what appears easiest or most accepted. Another significant shift during this stage is the deepening of self-trust. Earlier in your journey, you may have questioned your perception constantly, seeking external confirmation. But repeated experience begins proving something undeniable: your awareness is reliable when you are grounded and present. This builds quiet confidence. Not arrogance, not certainty about everything, but trust in your ability to perceive accurately when you listen carefully. And this trust changes how you move through the world. You hesitate less. You second-guess less. You respond more naturally because you are no longer disconnected from your inner guidance. At the same time, humility naturally grows alongside awareness, because the more you perceive, the more you realize how vast reality truly is. You understand that awareness is not about control, it is about connection, not about superiority but about sensitivity. Not about knowing everything, but about being open to continuous learning. Hidden gifts do not make you separate from others, they deepen your understanding of shared human experience. They allow you to see pain, joy, fear, and hope more clearly both in yourself and in others. You may also begin noticing that your presence affects environments in subtle ways. When you remain calm, others often feel calmer. When you listen deeply, people open more easily. When you enter a space with grounded awareness, tension sometimes softens without explanation. This happens because awareness influences atmosphere. Attention itself carries impact, and when your inner state is balanced, that balance quietly radiates outward. This realization introduces a new dimension of responsibility, not just for your perception, but for your presence. You begin recognizing that how you exist emotionally and mentally affects more than just your internal world. Your stability, clarity, and authenticity subtly shape the environments you move through. This is not something you force, it happens naturally when awareness becomes integrated rather than reactive. And integration is the true purpose of this stage, not just experiencing perception, but living with it seamlessly. No longer treating intuition as separate from reasoning or sensitivity as separate from strength. Everything begins working together. Thought to instinct, observation, all operating as one coordinated system of awareness. Life stops feeling fragmented. Experience becomes cohesive. What once felt like mysterious hidden abilities now feel like natural extensions of consciousness functioning in harmony. Perception becomes steady rather than overwhelming. Intuition becomes consistent rather than unpredictable. Sensitivity becomes informative rather than exhausting. And you begin realizing something quietly transformative. You are not developing something new, you are remembering how to function with full awareness. The world around you has not changed, but how you perceive it has transformed completely. Layers once invisible now feel obvious. Signals once confusing now feel clear. Experiences that once felt random now reveal structure and meaning. And perhaps most profoundly, you begin feeling deeply at home within your own awareness. Not questioning it constantly, not resisting it, not fearing it, simply living within it, fully present, fully observant, fully connected to the subtle intelligence that has been guiding you all along, waiting patiently for the moment you would finally recognize that what you once called hidden has always been an essential part of who you are becoming. And then there comes the moment when everything begins to settle into clarity, not the dramatic kind that arrives like a sudden revelation, but the quiet, steady kind that feels like coming home to yourself. This is where your hidden gifts stop feeling like something you are discovering and start feeling like something you are as living. No more constant questioning, no more searching for proof, no more trying to convince yourself that what you experience is real. Instead, awareness becomes natural, stable, integrated into the rhythm of your everyday life. You wake up and your perception is simply there. You move through your day and your intuition is simply present. You interact with others and your sensitivity quietly informs your understanding without overwhelming you. What once felt intense now feels balanced. What once felt confusing now feels structured. What once felt hidden now feels obvious. At this stage, you begin noticing that your awareness is no longer just about sensing more. It is about understanding more deeply. You see how emotions move through people like currents, shaping their words, their decisions, their reactions. You recognize how environments hold imprints of what has occurred within them. You observe how intention subtly shapes outcomes long before physical action takes place. Life begins revealing itself as a continuous interaction between visible and invisible influences, and instead of feeling overwhelmed by this complexity, you feel oriented within it. You understand where you stand. You understand how to listen. You understand when to act and when to remain still. This is where true inner stability forms, not because life becomes simple, but because you become centered within its complexity. Challenges still appear, uncertainty still exists, emotional waves still move through you, but they no longer disorient you the way they once did. You experience them fully without losing your grounding. You feel deeply without being consumed. You observe intensely without becoming scattered. This balance is not something you force. It develops naturally when awareness and trust merge into one steady presence within you. And with this stability comes a new relationship with fear. Earlier in your journey, the unknown may have felt threatening. Sensations you could not explain may have caused confusion or doubt. But now the unknown feels like space, possibility, expansion waiting to unfold. You no longer fear what you cannot immediately understand because you trust your ability to perceive, interpret, and respond with clarity when the time comes. Fear loses its power when awareness becomes steady, not because uncertainty disappears, but because your relationship with uncertainty transforms. You may also notice that your decisions become quieter, less dramatic, less conflicted. Instead of intense internal debates, you experience subtle alignment, a calm sense of direction that doesn't demand urgency or pressure. You simply know when something resonates with your inner truth, and when it does not. This knowing doesn't shout, it settles gently, like a deep breath that reaches the center of your being. And because of this, your choices become more intentional. You move toward what nourishes growth, connection, and authenticity. You move away from what creates distortion, tension, or imbalance, not out of judgment, but out of clarity. Another profound shift at this stage is how you experience connection with others. Before, your sensitivity may have made relationships feel complicated or draining. You may have absorbed emotions unintentionally, felt responsible for energy that wasn't yours, or struggled to explain what you sensed but couldn't prove. But now, connection becomes more conscious. You can be present with others without losing yourself. You can feel empathy without carrying what does not belong to you. You can understand emotional depth without becoming entangled in it. This allows relationships to become more authentic, more balanced, and more peaceful. People may begin responding to your presence differently as well, not because you are trying to influence anything, but because grounded awareness naturally creates calm. When someone is deeply centered, others often feel safe without knowing why. Conversations become more open. Tension softens more quickly. Silence becomes comfortable rather than awkward. Your presence itself becomes a form of communication, steady, attentive, receptive. And this quiet influence is not something you perform, it is simply the natural expression of integrated awareness. At this point, you also begin recognizing the role of intention in shaping experience. Not forced intention or wishful thinking, but focused awareness directed with clarity. You notice how your inner state subtly affects what unfolds around you. When you move with calm purpose, situations align more smoothly. When your attention is scattered, experiences feel fragmented. When your inner world is balanced, your external interactions reflect that balance more often. This doesn't mean you control reality, it means you participate in it consciously. You understand that perception, emotion, and attention are not passive, they are active elements within the flow of experience. And perhaps one of the most meaningful realizations of all is this: your hidden gifts were never meant to separate you from the world. They were meant to connect you to it more fully, to help you perceive truth more clearly, to help you respond with greater awareness, to help you live with deeper presence. They are not tools for escape, they are tools for engagement. They allow you to experience life, not just at the surface level, but at the level where meaning, emotion, and awareness continuously interact. You begin seeing beauty in subtlety, in quiet moments, in unspoken understanding, in the gentle exchange of presence between people. You notice details others rush past, the shift in someone's expression when they feel understood, the change in atmosphere when honesty enters a conversation, the sense of alignment when action matches intention perfectly. These moments, once invisible, now feel significant, because awareness reveals that meaning often exists in what is quiet rather than what is loud. There is also a growing sense of gratitude that emerges naturally, not forced positivity but genuine appreciation for perception itself, for the ability to feel deeply, to understand nuance, to sense connection, to recognize truth. Even the challenges that shaped your awareness begin to feel meaningful, because you can see how they refined your perception, strengthened your stability, and guided your growth. Nothing feels wasted. Every experience becomes part of the structure that formed your clarity, and as this understanding deepens, something remarkable happens. Striving begins to fade. The constant urge to become more softens into simply being fully present. You are no longer chasing awakening, you are living within it. No longer searching for hidden abilities, you are expressing them naturally. no longer trying to understand who you are experiencing yourself directly, moment by moment, with openness and acceptance. Life continues moving, situations continue changing, but your relationship with experience has transformed permanently. You are no longer reacting blindly or navigating unconsciously. You are observing, sensing, and responding with awareness that is both steady and fluid, grounded yet receptive, focused yet expansive. And perhaps the deepest truth that settles within you is this: there was never a moment when these gifts were truly absent. They were present in every instinct you doubted, every perception you questioned, every quiet knowing you dismissed. They were unfolding gradually, patiently, shaping your awareness through experience, waiting for the moment when recognition would become acceptance, and acceptance would become embodiment. Now, nothing needs to be hidden anymore, not your sensitivity, not your intuition, not your depth of perception. They are simply part of how you exist, part of how you move through the world, part of how you understand reality. And as you stand in this quiet clarity, fully present within your own awareness, you realize something both simple and profound. The extraordinary was never separate from the ordinary. It was woven into every moment, every sensation, every subtle signal you learned to notice. And now that you see it clearly, you cannot unsee it. Now that you feel it fully, you cannot disconnect from it. You are not searching anymore. You are aware, and awareness, once fully lived, becomes the most natural state of all.